Chapter 19. Enjoying Life in Adversity. The Chinese Communist Party launched off a one-strike-three anti-campaign in the early 1970s with the purpose to crack down on current counter-revolutionary, sabotage against corruption and theft, oppose speculation and oppose extravagance and waste. The two rightists, the married couple Jiang and Biyun, had naturally been targeted again as they had been in every movement during the previous years. They had become the negative models denounced publicly by other people and were asked to write self-criticism twice every week. Though they racked their brains, they still fell short in completing their thought reports to the party committee in the Gaoyang commune. Their writings were returned to them and they were asked to redo the reports. This first version had been remarked to have not touched the roots of their reactionary thoughts, which were considered to have been hidden deeply in their souls. They had to rewrite their self-criticism once again. This process repeated several times until a final version was achieved to the basic satisfaction of the committee. But given their slowness in remodeling their thoughts and raising their communist consciousness, they had been punished, with their salaries reduced another 15%. After such decreases for several times, they earned only about half the amount they used to earn before being branded as rightists. But they still worked the same teaching load as others at the school even though they received only this half payment. Occasionally, Biyun complained when she was at home with Jiang. "With such a low wage paid to us, how can we manage to live?" Jiang had to comfort her by showing his view of the issue. He had cited the same saying by Confucius as Tianzhu did in his talk with the farmer. "Darling, please do not mind our living too much. If a literate only thinks of a comfortable life, he is not fit to be called a literate. We can still manage a fair living if we try to save some unnecessary expenses." But Jiang's words did not stop Biyun's complaints. "Everything is costly. You do not know the difficulty as you are not in charge of the whole family's living. Fortunately, our family is of a small size now. There are only 4 of us and we have only 2 young kids. Some poor families with less income have to manage to rise up even more kids." Jiang could usually only respond to Biyun's complaints with a forced smile under such circumstances. All teachers at the schools in the Gaoyang district were organized to have a political study in the summer. They were encouraged to make a self-criticism and also denounce others. Those who reported others' secrets and helped to dig out more class enemies would be especially commended and rewarded. Otherwise, if one had known other people's secret of a counter-revolutionary experience and did not report it to the party, he or she would be punished in the same way as those who hid their experience themselves. This rule caused everyone to feel the danger and consider all people surrounding them as potential informers and their enemies. Jiang and his elder sister, Huizhi, had both attended the political study. Jiang belonged to the Gaoyang group and Huizhi belonged to Yulong group, as they came from different schools. Jiang had been forced to do self-criticizing at every session. As Jiang had already been branded as a rightist and the criticizing of him would not bring much political credit, those who wanted to seek big rewards did not focus on denouncing him. It was no secret that the second eldest son and the second oldest daughter in Xiao's family had gone abroad after Guomindang failed in the power struggle against the Communist Party. In those years whoever had an overseas relationship was considered a sinner. Huizhi was attacked much more due to this overseas family association. Several teachers working at her school accused her of having a family relationship abroad. But it was quite ambiguous to them when Huizhi communicated with her elder sister and brother the most recent time. They thought even though it might be a false accusation, it would not bring harm to themselves at all. No matter whether their denouncing was true or not, they seemed just to have achieved the goal of showing a positive attitude and hoped their taking an active part in the movement would earn them good political credit. One day in a study session at Yulong Group, one of Huizhi's colleagues brought up the issue. "Xia Huizhi, you have a very complicated family relationship abroad. You should confess how you revealed our country's secrets to other hostile countries through your brother and sister living abroad." Huizhi was not that mild in character as the critic expected, and she showed her wisdom in responding to the absurd accusation. It is true that my elder brother and sister lived abroad. But that was many years ago. We have not communicated with each other for a long time. Your accusation of my revealing our country's secrets is totally groundless. I really miss my brother and sister and want to pick up contact with them again. Do you know their address, and could you do me a favor by also giving me their contact information so I can communicate with them? I have been longing for a reunion with them. The accuser immediately became dumb as she did not have solid evidence to show that Huizhi had recently still communicated with her sister or brother. The issue of an overseas relationship had become a fast knot. Huizhi had protected herself and her family by her wisdom. Her courage and smart response had also helped a lot with her younger brother Jiang and his family. It could be imagined what would happen to both their families if Huizhi had become panicked with the accuser's purposeful attacks and became cowardly from others' vicious charges and fell down under the tremendous pressure. In Xiao's family, Jiang was the only male member who remained to work in the hometown area, and the complicated relationship abroad would easily add one more crime to him considering he already had been branded as a rightist. As Huizhi and Tianzhu went to summer school, they brought their eldest son Zhu with them. Zhu had been too energetic and often played some mischief with both adults and kids of same age as him, which brought troubles to Huizhi and Tianzhu every time. Huizhi did not have peace in his heart to leave Zhu at home and thus decided to bring him to their study. For the two younger kids, Jing and Fu, Huizhi had no choice but to keep them at home. On the night before their leaving for summer school, Huizhi told Jing to take good care of her younger brother. They requested a relative living nearby to visit Jing and Fu once every few days. On the following day, Huizhi left their house quietly without letting Fu know it. But hours later, Fu found that his mother had disappeared. The young boy missed his mother so much that he tried to follow the road his mother took as he had heard some words sporadically from the parents about the teacher's summer study at Gaoyang. For the first several days after Huizhi's departure, Jing fulfilled the tasks her mother had given her. She carefully watched over Fu. Fu's several attempts of heading to the road toward Gaoyang had been caught and stopped by his elder sister. Fu, if you try to escape again and get lost on the road, you would be torn into pieces by a tiger and end up inside the tiger's stomach in no time. Jing warned her younger brother after having gotten tired of Fu's attempts of running away. I just miss Mom, Fu cried, and Mom often told stories to me. Okay, if you promise me you won't run away anymore, I could tell a story to you every day like Mom did before. Really? If you tell me a good story every day, I promise I will not attempt to go to Gaoyang anymore. Fu loved stories and was excited to hear his sister's promise. Deal. Jing started to retell the stories she had heard from her teachers in class before the summer vacation. Since she started her primary school, Jing had cultivated a nice habit of repeating the stories she had heard in the classroom to her mother when she got back home after school. Huizhi had always been very patient to listen to her daughter's retelling and used her teaching expertise to improve Jing's narrating ability and skills. After a few years of practicing and improving with the help by her mother, Jing became a good storyteller by her senior grade of elementary school. Fu liked to listen to her telling stories as much as he liked listening to stories from his mother. Now Jing was telling him a favorite story she had learned recently in class. Once upon a time, a family of 4 deer was chased by several hunters. The deer ran to their best capability but were pressed hard by the hunters. The hunters were very familiar with this mountain region and they tried to drive the deer to a dead end, a cliff hundreds of meters high. The valley was so wide that it was impossible for the deer to jump over to the opposite mountain. The deer seemed to have also sensed the danger fast approaching them. They hesitated a little but did not turn back to face the guns of the hunters. Instead, they continued to run full strength toward the high cliff without slowing down at all. What happened next? Was the whole deer family killed by hunters, or did they drop off the cliff? Fu felt nervous and worried about the huge danger the deer family was to face. A few seconds later, the 4 deer reached the cliff. It seemed they now had only 2 choices. They could either take the risk by jumping off the cliff, which would most probably lead to all of them dying, or they could turn back to face the shots of the hunters. It is so sad. Did they jump off the cliff, or were they killed by the hunters? Fu sighed and continued to ask with big curiosity. Guess what happened next? The 4 deer just paused on the cliffside for a short while and seemed to discuss their best plan of an exit from this trap. Then the biggest and also the strongest deer jumped into the air. My teacher said this first one was the father deer. And instantly following that, a young deer jumped with a little higher angle to put its feet on the father deer's back. With that bouncing force from the father deer's back, the son deer successfully jumped over the distant gap between the opposite cliffs and safely landed on the other side of the valley. But the father deer dropped quickly into the deep valley. That's too much misery for the deer family, Fu cried. Affected by Fu's tears, Jing continued the story with also tears in her eyes. The mother deer and the daughter deer also repeated this process similarly. And the daughter deer escaped to safety, but the mother deer dropped off the high cliff. What a miserable result. The hunters murdered the deer parents. Jing did not comment on Fu's loud remarks but continued to talk. But my teacher said that in the next life cycle, the son deer and the father deer would change their positions. The father deer would become the new son deer and the son deer would become the new father deer, so the next time they faced the same danger, the father deer would jump on the back of the son or the new father and escape. So will happen also to the mother deer and the daughter deer. The selfless love will be repeated continuously from generation to generation. I would not like them to become deer anymore in their next life cycle, Fu interrupted. I want them to become hunters and the hunters become the deer next time. Fu's words caused his sister to laugh. But Jing smiled just briefly and then asked, if ours are the deer family, would our Baba and Mom save us when facing the same danger? Fu seemed confused by his sister's question, so she did not wait for Fu's response and answered herself. Definitely, Baba and Mama would do what the father and mother deer had done. One more story, please, just one more, Fu begged. No, you agreed that I would tell you one story each day. We should observe the rule. Jing actually felt that the number of stories she knew was limited and worried that she could not manage to tell Fu a story every day through the long summer. While Fu listened to his sister tell the story of the deer family, their mother Huiji was facing the severe political storm and being accused by others regarding her overseas relationship. While their mother and uncle were suffering from the political attacks and humiliations by other attendees during the summer study, Fu was bothering his sister for more stories. Jia, you promised to tell me at least one good story every day. You have not yet done that today. Jing felt her stories had gripped Fu's attention so much that he should have forgotten his desire of going to Gaoyang to find their mother. She did not watch him as closely as during the first several days after their mother left. As such, she made a big mistake in losing control over Fu. Several days later, when her story database dried up, she suddenly found that Fu had really disappeared one afternoon. She tried to search every place where Fu used to hide from her, but found no trace of him at all. She became very frightened and cried all the way to the relative, Aunt Xiang, whom Huiji had entrusted for helping to watch over Jing and Fu. While Jing was telling Aunt Xiang about Fu's disappearance, the reckless boy was heading alone on his way toward Gaoyang. He had been determined to go there to find his mother. Fu had already walked a few miles when Jing first realized he had disappeared. The day became darker and darker after the sunset. It was completely dark before Fu could even finish only 1/3 of the whole distance. At that moment, Fu could not help but remember the scary tiger story his elder sister used to threaten him. Jing had told Fu more than one time that he would end in a tiger's stomach if he dared to run away by himself. He had now thoroughly regretted his rash act and broke out a loud cry in the darkness. I want my mother. I want my elder sister, woo woo woo. Fortunately, Fu did not wait on the roadside too long. In 10 minutes or so, two adults headed in this direction along the same road with flashlights in their hands. They selected to take a night walk to avoid the hot air of the daytime. After getting closer, they clearly heard the crying voice of a little boy and also identified it as Fu, the younger son of teacher Xia, with whom they were quite familiar. "Fu, what are you crying here for, and how did you come here?" one of them asked. "I miss my mom. I miss my mom." Fu lowered the pitch of his cry after the arrival of the two adults, whom he felt had saved him from the mouth of a tiger that he imagined was waiting in the darkness to eat him. "Where is your mother?" "She is at Gaoyang, studying politics together with other teachers." Fu had no knowledge about what he was talking about and just repeated the words he learned at home from his parents talking to each other. With his strong desire of going to Gaoyang refreshed, he requested, "Uncles, can you please bring me to Gaoyang?" The two adults felt it was highly dangerous to leave Fu uncared for in the night. They thought they should either bring Fu back to his elder sister Jing or take him to Gaoyang. Having discussed a little between themselves, they finally decided to bring Fu with them to Gaoyang as they were also heading to that place. This could also save much of their time as they would not need to take a round trip to bring Fu back to Yulong School. Huizhi had just successfully defended herself and her family in the suffocating political atmosphere when Fu was brought to her by somebody that afternoon. Her tense mood was relieved a lot by seeing her youngest son. She held Fu tightly and kissed his small face a few times and kept saying, "My little one, my dear son," with tears full in her eyes. She could not tell if the tears were from the mental torturing she suffered from the political study or the happiness of seeing Fu. Maybe both factors caused her mixed emotions. When she calmed down a little, she thought she had forgotten one important thing. She was very surprised and confused about how the 4-year-old Fu could manage to come there from home by completing all 15 miles of the mountain road. "My little dear, how have you come here? Does your elder sister know you have left home?" Yes, she knew. For fear of his mother's punishment, Fu dared not to tell his mother he had managed to escape from the strict control of his elder sister. "And two uncles brought me here." "Who are they, and have you said thanks to them?" "Yes, I thanked them much. I even said they would be blessed and rewarded in the future with their kindness. One uncle is Li Sherdwan and I forget the other one's name." Fu had pronounced the name unclearly, so Huizhi was first at a loss on hearing the name Li Sherdwan, but she quickly realized it was Li Sherdwan, who worked for the department store at Yulong and needed to travel regularly to Gaoyang to purchase some commodities for the convenience of local villagers. Fu could easily pronounce Wan as Duan at his young age. When the torturous political study at summer school ended, the leader in the Gaoyang group had a serious talk with Jiang. "Teacher Xia, most of your colleagues thought you did not do well in the political study this time. You have written your self-criticism report 4 times to make the party committee satisfied and pass your self-checking. Other teachers have better political consciousness than you. As had been made clear before this study, those who improved well should be rewarded and those who have done a poor job should be punished. Unfortunately, you have been evaluated by the examining committee as belonging to the second category. Have you any opinion on this?" "I have no other thoughts about this conclusion the party committee made on me." Jiang did not want to argue, which potentially could have caused more trouble for him. It was still 10 days before the fall semester when the math study was finished. Huizhi invited Jiang to Yulong School to relax. Jiang was a little worried about leaving Biyun and 2 kids alone at Gaoyang School. But Biyun felt Huizhi's arrangement made good sense and she showed understanding. "Darling, do not worry about us," she said. "Please go stay with your sister's family. You will get some good rest there in Yulong's comfortable environment, given that we have a very hot summer here in Gaoyang. It is not bad at all for me and 2 kids to stay here alone for these several days as I can use the time to plan the music classes I will teach next semester." This was the second time Jiang went to Yulong. Years earlier, Huizhi had Jiang went there and planned to have him be enlightened politically by Tianzhu. That trip had been interrupted due to the advancement of the anti-rightist movement in Gaoyang. Tianzhu did not forget Huizhi's entrusting and wanted to build a closer relation with Jiang first, before having some heart-to-heart talks with him. Tianzhu decided to use learn how to swim from Jiang as a starting point. Jiang was a good swimmer since his childhood, so it was quite natural for Tianzhu to ask Jiang to teach him how to swim. Jiang, I have never learned well how to swim. Every time when I tried to enter the deep water, I was scared to death. I was choked with water several times. Could you please teach me how to swim during your stay here these days? No problem, Brother Tianzhu. I believe I can instruct you to become a good swimmer. On a summer afternoon, they went to the Dachia Reservoir to practice swimming for the first time. Jiang judged immediately from Tianzhu's body movement in the water that he was really a green hand. Brother Tianzhu, the very first thing to learn about swimming is to become familiar with the water's nature, or more specifically, you need first to learn the buoyancy of water. How can I learn that? Tianzhu asked. You may try to spread your body flat on the water surface and feel that the water has exerted a force to raise you up. Jiang illustrated by lying on his back over the water surface. Tianzhu tried to imitate Jiang's position, but he could only sustain for a few seconds and could not help but let his body fall down into the water. He tried again and again, but only ended up being choked with water a couple times. Tianzhu became a little frustrated with this learning process. Jiang knew Tianzhu's problem was quite common among many beginners, but he still felt that Tianzhu's slow learning was a little disappointing after practicing many times. Okay, Brother Tianzhu. I can teach you in another way. Please forget how to swim first and also give up your attempt to float on water for the time being. Just stand and try to hold your breath for a moment. How long can you last without breathing at all? Tianzhu tried this and breathed a long breath after about 1 minute. I think I can do this with no problem for at least 50 seconds. Now please hold your breath again and try to put your whole body in a flat position in the water. Because you pause with your breath for the time being, there is no possibility for you to choke with water and you need not be that nervous about being totally submerged. During this breath-holding period, try to move your hands and feet in a coordinated way. Whenever you feel a need to breathe or risk being choked again, just stand upright immediately. You can see that the water is so shallow here and there is no danger at all for you to drown. So you can practice this technique first without any panic. Tianzhu followed Jiang's instructions and practiced a few times. Little by little he managed to control his body and did not fall down into water anymore. With more harmonious and graceful movements of his hands to match those by his feet, he could also float for a while on the water surface without being choked anymore. See, Brother Tianzhu, you have mastered how to float on water. Next, hold your breath and try to move your body forward with the help from the movement of your hands and feet. At the beginning, Tianzhu found he could only move forward for a few meters during the holding of breath for one time. After practicing a few more times with his hands and feet moving in a more coordinated and harmonious way, he could move forward 7 to 8 meters without being choked in the water. Tianzhu was very happy with the progress he made that day. Jiang's instructions did help a lot in his rapid improvement. He wanted to learn more with a huge enthusiasm, just like a kid with a big interest in something he newly learned. But Jiang saw it had been long since sunset and that it had become almost completely dark, so he decided to call it a day. Brother Tianzhu, we have to stop here now to avoid any potential risk due to the darkness. You see, the screen of night has fallen and we cannot see clearly on the water surface. For the following several days, Jiang taught Tianzhu how to raise his head out of water to exchange breath so he could swim for much longer distance. Tianzhu's swimming posture still looked a little awkward, but he could easily swim over 20 to 30 meters now. While teaching Tianzhu to swim, Jiang also discovered something unexpectedly in the reservoir. There were many fish living inside. While the two men were practicing swimming, some small fish kept shuttling among their feet in shallow water. Perhaps due to the hot weather, a few bigger fish would jump out of the water every now and then in the central area of the reservoir, where the water was much deeper. Jiang had never let Tianzhu swim for a long distance to there. He had remembered his efficient method of catching fish at his teenage age and talked to Tianzhu about his idea, which he felt quite feasible. "Are you confident you could catch a fish this way?" Tianzhu still did not believe Jiang's plan. "I used to catch a lot fish using this method long ago. The river at Guiyang was even much shallower than this reservoir, and there were not so many fish in that river. It is definitely worth trying here, as more fish may grow inside this reservoir. Is it really okay for you to swim that long distance to the center region of the reservoir while also carrying the fishing basket?" "Brother Tianzhu, please do not worry. I am a very good swimmer. Good enough beyond your imagination." Jiang was very confident with his swimming capability and even showed a little unhappiness with Tianzhu's distrust in him. "Okay, but please first keep this only between you and me. Otherwise, Huizhi will criticize you and also stop your plan. Even though she is your elder sister, she may have less confidence in you than me now," Tianzhu joked. "Fine. Keep the secret and let us give them a big surprise." Jiang's plan was to use a big fishing basket made of bamboo. He had observed that there were mainly two types of fish inside the reservoir, catfish and grass carp. From his experience during childhood, he knew the favorite foods of these two types of fish. A pumpkin flower was put inside the basket and a little gear was designed to trap any greedy fish. If a fish came to bite the flower and triggered the gear, the basket would automatically get locked. Small fish could still flee from the holes in the basket, but big fish would have no way to escape. Jiang and Tianzhu would set up the basket in the late afternoon every day after they practiced swimming and keep it underwater overnight. They would come back to check what they had achieved the following day. On the day following their first setup, the basket seemed to have remained unmoved. Jiang swam to it and found that the pumpkin flower had remained almost intact. "Suspicious fish, maybe the food is not good for you?" Jiang replaced the pumpkin flower with a fresh flower and also moved the basket several meters away. The next day they found that the basket seemed to have moved a few meters, and Jiang found that the flower had been eaten a little. Fucking cunning fish. Hopefully it works and the payday is nearer. Jiang again replaced the flower with a new fresh flower and moved the basket to another site nearby. The following day, when they come back to check, they found the basket had moved far away from its original location and the basket itself was also strongly waving on the water surface. It is pay time. Jiang could hardly conceal his joy. Being not 100% sure and afraid of disappointing Tianzhu, he added hopefully but could still not contain his excitement. He promptly jumped into the water and swam quickly toward the basket. Tianzhu watched him labor through the water as he dragged it back to the land. It seemed something inside the basket kept struggling and produced huge splashes behind Jiang. With one hand reaching back to drag the basket and another hand used to swim, he moved much slower in the water. "Be careful," Tianzhu shouted to Jiang from land. Finally, Jiang reached the bank. Being out of water, one big fish kept jumping up and down in the basket and struggled with its life. "Great job. What a big fish. It weighs at least 10 jin." Tianzhu could not help but exclaim. The whole family had a big dinner that night. Most excited were the kids. Zhu called out to Huizhi that he wanted to go with Baba and his uncle to fish and swim the next day. But Huizhi would not break the rules she made for the kids. She strictly forbade them to approach the reservoir, and they should never ever go close to any large pond either. There had been tragedies every year, with small children drowning. "Baba, younger uncle, I wanted to go with you tomorrow." Zhu continued crying and cast his helpless eyes to the two adults, as he knew it was useless to ask his mother's permission. said Tianju. Huizhi, you see, Ju has such a strong desire and Jiang is also a good swimmer. Ju should be safe with his uncle and me there. It is easy for you to say so. Huizhi interrupted. Have you thought of the possible results? After a pleasant tasting of the happiness from swimming and fishing in the water, Ju would definitely want to go there more frequently. Jiang would return to Gaoyang soon and you would not stay at home most of the time either. Who could guarantee his safety if he ran to the reservoir alone someday? Tianju was bombed dumb by Huizhi's fast and angry rebuke. Jiang originally wanted to suggest something to Huizhi. He had a different view in his mind to cultivate kids other than Huizhi's approach. Forbidding was not always a good solution, he believed. Instead, he thought knowing how to swim should be safer for kids. But having seen his elder sister's firm stand, he swallowed back the words he had almost expelled out of his mouth. His second consideration was that he would stay there for only a few more days. If he could not teach and train Ju to be good enough at swimming, Huizhi would definitely not forgive him if some bad thing would really happen to Ju later. With these thoughts, Jiang kept his silence and took no sides on Tianju and Jihu's arguing. Seeing his mother's resolute attitude and hopeless to go with his father and uncle the next day, Ju cried even louder. Huizhi could not stand Ju's crying anymore and brought up another idea to calm down him. Don't cry anymore. Ask your uncle to make a ship for you. He is very good at this. Huizhi turned toward Jiang and said, I remember you made a very good toy ship before, and it could even sail in water. Huizhi's words reminded Jiang of his joyous and carefree time during his early teenage years. Good idea. I will make a ship for you, Ju, which can sail. But you should stop crying now. Jiang's words made Ju joyful again. As he heard he would have a sailing ship, he beamed a big smile immediately. With tears on his face, his smile looked a little funny. 3 adults also smiled on seeing his silly appearance. The next day, Jiang spent several hours building a ship. He used some very thin and light plates of wood to form the major structure of the ship. The plates had been bound together by several nails. To tighten the open space between the plates and strengthen the binding, he used some resins. He heated a piece of flat plastic above a fire and bended it into a tent shape after it got soft. This tent was installed at one end of the ship, which seemed to provide shielding for the sailors on the ship to avoid rain and sunburn. On the other end of the ship, he used nails to fix a long chopstick, which looked like a pole. On the top of the chopstick he stuck a piece of rectangular white cloth, which looked like a sail. Marvelous job. Tianju praised. I did not know you had such a skill. If you are not engaged in other jobs someday, you can just open a toy shop to sell such ships. I believe you could make a good fortune at it. Do not tease with me, brother Tianju. Tianju's praise made Jiang a little shy. Can this ship sail? Ju had waited long enough and could not suppress his excitement. He was eager to have a try. Let's go to some water. Jiang also seemed to regain his childish heart. That afternoon, Jiang brought Ju to a nearby small pond, which was of a long, oval shape. Wind blew from time to time and the water surface formed some wrinkles. After figuring out the blowing direction of the wind, Jiang put the ship lightly on the water. Sail off, he said. The wind and sail propelled the ship forward slowly. Ju happily and excitedly clapped his hands. The ship is sailing. The ship is sailing. Yes, Ju is the ship's captain, Jiang joked. They played there a long time until sunset and then complete darkness. Jiang seemed to have returned to his happy years of childhood when he had been Ju's age. Mom, Uncle's ship can really sail in water. Ju reported upon returning home. I know that. I knew that long ago. Long before you were born. Huizhi's words reflected the pride she had for her younger brother. Tianju had always on his mind the task assigned to him by Huizhi. During his previous several swimming practices, he had good chances to talk with Jiang more frankly. Jiang, you enjoy playing with many things related to water, such as swimming, fishing, and ship sailing. I assume you belong to the type of people who have high wisdom. As Confucius said, the wise man delights in water and the good man delights in mountains. The wise man is active and the good man tranquil. The wise man is happy and the good man enjoys a long life. I observed you have matched all three standards Confucius described. Brother Tianzhu, you are kidding. I am not that happy, as you have seen. What type of man do you think you belong to? Jiang asked with a curiosity. Me? I think I like a mountain more than water. You might already know that as you have seen my awkward swimming in water. Tianzhu laughed at himself first and also brought out some smiles from Jiang, and then continued with a story. I almost drowned in a small pond in trying to swim when I was only 9 years old. After that I developed hydrophobia. You have made me lose my fear of water step by step. I should thank you a lot. Tianzhu paused a little and then continued. As for mountains, I have really had a special affection for them for many years. Maybe this is because I have grown up inside a mountainous village. I enjoy that feeling of hiking on a mountain road and crossing among various types of trees without worrying other things. If I have enough leisure sometime in the future, I hope I can climb over all the famous mountains in China. Brother Tianzhu, Confucius is really a great saint and he had judged you right. You are a good man with a lot of kindness, and it is not surprising that you like mountains so much. Seeing that Jiang was in a very good mood, Tianzhu tried to talk Jiang into reality by shifting the topic a little. Jiang, you mentioned that you are not as happy as you appear. I know you are very smart with high wisdom. Your sister Huizhi and I both hope you could not only use your wisdom on arts, literature and teaching but also on real life. Life is like a swimming process. The water will not keep peace all the time. There are waves from time to time. Sometimes a wave can push you to the top. Some other times a wave can pull you down to the water's bottom. The reality and human society is like water. What we can do is just follow the current instead of moving wrongly against the wave. You should become a seaman, good at swimming on the tide and the top of the water's surface. Jiang seemed to be very impressed with Tianzhu's words. After being silent for a while, he said, Brother Tianzhu, I don't want you and Yao Jia to worry much about me. You see, I have had a whale of a time here this summer, as it brought back my beautiful memories of swimming and fishing in childhood. I have enjoyed a lot from my visit and almost forget I am a rightist. I will have new life after returning to my school. That is good. Enjoy many happy years to come in your life. Tianzhu answered, but still sensed some sadness from Jiang's forced smiles. Happy time went fast, and Jiang's pleasant trip to Yulong ended soon. The day following his return to Gaoyang was their regular payday. Jiang found that both Biyun's and his monthly salaries had been cut by another 8 yuan. This was the third time his salary had been cut. Jiang and Biyun suffered far more than they had expected both mentally and materially since being branded as rightists. Besides being the target of revolution in every political movement, they had also been mistreated economically. What they earned together just amounted to the level of one single teacher who had worked at the school for the same length of time as they had. Their suffering from such financial injustice made them have to plan well. Though they lived their lives in an unusually tight way financially, they still had peace in their hearts and minds. To decrease Jiang's guilt about his contributions to the family, Biyun consoled him, saying she could take the rough with the smooth. Jiang also often quoted the words by Confucius and told Biyun the stories of the sage and his disciples. The most told story by Jiang had been Confucius' favored disciple, Yan Hui, who lived in a poor alley and ate crude foods and drank cold water but did not change his happy attitude. He once told Biyun a story about Confucius, how he floated around several small countries and suffered from starvation and cold. Local villagers described him as being like a homeless dog, But he himself just laughed and took it easy with this analogy, which he told his followers in a self-joking way to portray a good image of himself. Jiang also told the stories of Taoist scripts. Being affected by Jiang's optimistic attitude, Biyun was not as sad as in the early years when she was labeled a rightist. Gradually, she restored her hobby of singing and sang often when only she and Jiang were at home. Amid that highly depressing political environment, it became more and more enjoyable for Biyun to listen to Jiang recite the words and stories of Confucius and other sages. One time when closing the door after dinner and having the two kids gone to bed, Biyun said to Jiang in a half-joking and half-serious way, "Darling, your singing of those Zhuangzi and Confucius words sounded really ridiculous in your own created melodies. Actually, your songs have no rhymes at all. How about we work together to make a real song? You write the words and I will do the melody. Are you serious?" Jiang liked the idea and became very excited with Biyun's suggestion. "If you help to create a good song for me, I will do some home chores for you for 2 months. Okay, we have a gentleman's agreement now and you should not take back your words." After that day, Jiang and Biyun closed their door soon after their dinner and arranged the two kids to sleep earlier, and put a lot of effort into their cooperative work. Jiang spent a few nights writing a song, which read, "What left me yesterday can be retained no more. What bothers me today can be put to ignore. The successful are not those we adore, nor the unsuccessful those we deplore. High position and great wealth are like floating clouds. There are a lot prettier things in the world. We must cherish them all, cherish them all. The cool wind on the river and the full moon over the mountains become a pleasant sound when entering ears. Change to beautiful colors when meeting eyes. No one forbids me to make them mine. No limit is set to the use of them all." Biyun spent a few more days completing a melody for Jiang's song. To show his appreciation for Biyun's work, Jiang composed another poem especially dedicated to her. "Since we have fallen in love, life has become beautiful. You are always my dream girl. I love you with my heart and soul. When I first saw your face, I knew heaven had answered my prayer. In your smiles there is a sun. In my heart flows the honey. Despite all the hardships, life is not a misery. To your love my heart goes on, until no more moon and sun." It was under such a politically dismal atmosphere that the love between this kind couple made a joyous environment inside their household. Another baby was also conceived soon. They started to consider what name they would give to their third-born months before Biyun's due date. They agreed to use song for a boy and sing for a girl.